A sound like distant thunder rolls across a snow-covered airfield outside Moscow. But there are no clouds, just four turboshaft engines spinning to life. What rises from that runway will be the largest helicopter humanity has ever built. Then, and now, more than half a century later. But this isn't just the story of a record-breaking machine. It's the story of a helicopter built to carry nuclear missiles. And the moment history almost went differently. The MiL V-12 could lift over 97 tons into the air. That's heavier than 9 attack helicopters combined. Only 2 were ever built. Today, only 1 survives. So why did the Soviet Union walk away from the most powerful helicopter on Earth? 1959. The Cold War is escalating. The Soviet Union is racing to build weapons that can strike anywhere on Earth and hide anywhere too. Intercontinental ballistic missiles were massive, and moving them by road was slow and exposed. The Kremlin wanted a way to fly them instead. The answer came from an unlikely place, Antonov's giant An-22 transport plane. If a plane that size could fly, why not a helicopter to match it? In 1961, the State Committee on Aviation Technology gave the order, build a helicopter that could lift 20 to 25 tons. Nothing like it existed. The task fell to one man, Mikhail Mil. Already legendary for the Mi-6 and Mi-Sek, he was about to attempt his most ambitious design yet. His bureau had already built giants, the Mi-6, the Mi-10. But this new machine would dwarf them both. The first problem was brutal physics. No single rotor could survive the torque needed to lift that much weight. Mil's engineers tested tandem layouts, like the American Chinook. They tested stacked rotors, like a Kamov design. Both had fatal flaws at this scale. The solution was radical. 2 rotors mounted side by side on massive outrigger wings. No Soviet helicopter had ever looked like this. To save time, Mil reused proven parts. The engines, transmissions, and rotor systems from the Mi-6 and Mi-10 just doubled. 4 of those engines, each producing over 6,000 horsepower, would drive 2 enormous rotors, 35 meters across. The airframe itself grew into something unprecedented. A cargo bay 28 meters long, wide enough to swallow a missile whole. By 1965, the shape of the V-12 was taking form. A fuselage, the size of an airliner, with 2 rotor pods spread wider than a Boeing 737's wings. Every design choice served one goal: raw lifting power. The landing gear alone used tires as tall as a grown man. At the rear, giant clamshell doors could swallow armored vehicles, mobile missile launchers, or entire prefabricated buildings. The cockpit sat 2 stories up above the cargo hold, 6 crew members working together just to fly this single machine. Keeping 2 independent rotor systems perfectly synchronized required a drive shaft running the entire length of the wing. A single point of failure Mil's team obsessed over. If one engine failed, the interconnect shaft let the remaining 3 keep both rotors turning. It was elegant. It was also enormously heavy. Empty, the V-12 weighed 60 tons. Fully loaded, it could push past 100. Nothing on rotors had ever carried this much mass. June 27, 1967. The V-12 attempts its first flight. It barely leaves the ground, an unsuccessful hop that reveals hidden vibration problems. For a year, engineers chased the vibration through the airframe, testing, adjusting, testing again. The stakes were enormous, literally. July 10, 1968. The V-12 lifts cleanly into the sky for the first time. A helicopter the size of an airliner, finally flying true. Test pilots described it as surprisingly stable. A giant that flew with the calm confidence of a machine twice its size. Then came the record attempts. In February 1969, the V-12 lifted over 31 tons to a height of nearly 3,000 meters. That August, it broke its own record. Over 40 tons lifted to more than 2,000 meters. Records that, decades later, still stand. By the end of its test program, the V-12 had set 8 world records. No helicopter before or since has matched what it carried. In 1971, the West finally saw it. The V-12 arrived at the Paris Air Show and stunned every engineer who witnessed it. Western analysts had never seen a helicopter this size. Its sheer scale forced NATO to reconsider what Soviet aerospace was truly capable of. A second prototype followed in 1973, delayed for years by engine shortages. 2 aircraft. That's all that would ever exist. By then, the world the V-12 was designed for had already begun to change. Ballistic missiles no longer needed to fly to hide. New road-mobile launchers could hide missiles among ordinary highways and forests. The very threat the V-12 was built to solve had found a cheaper answer. The Kremlin grew impatient. The program had taken over a decade, and the V-12 no longer had a clearly defined military role. In the mid-1970s, the program was quietly shelved. No third prototype, no production line, no Mi-12 ever entered Soviet service. A proposed successor, the six-engine V-16, never left the drawing board. The dream of an even bigger helicopter died with it. Instead, Miel's bureau turned to a smaller, more practical giant, the Mi-26. Conventional, efficient, and it actually entered service. Today, only one 412 survives, preserved at the Menino Air Force Museum outside Moscow, a monument to Soviet ambition that outran its own usefulness. That is the real history. Now, what if the story had gone differently? What if the Kremlin had chosen to mass produce the V-12? Everything from this point forward is speculation. A realistic, technically grounded look at a road not taken, not history, a possibility. Imagine it. 1970. Instead of shelving the program, the Kremlin orders a production run. Dozens of V-12s begin rolling off Soviet assembly lines. The first challenge would have been unavoidable. Where do you even put an aircraft this size? Most Soviet airbases had no hangar tall enough. New infrastructure would have been required across the Soviet Union. Reinforced runways, taller hangars, wider maintenance bays built just for this one aircraft. Fuel consumption would have been staggering. 4 engines burning at full power made every flight hour extraordinarily expensive to sustain. Realistically, the Soviet Air Force could have deployed a fleet for strategic missile transport, moving IBM stages to remote hardened launch sites deep in Siberia. But by the time mass production could realistically begin, road mobile missile launchers were already cheaper, faster to build, and far easier to hide. A fleet of V-12s would likely have found a second life in civil engineering, hauling turbines, oil rig modules, and prefabricated structures into Siberia's roadless interior. Aeroflot had once considered a passenger version, one capable of carrying nearly 200 people. In this timeline, that idea might have taken flight. When impractive to us, realistically though, a passenger V-12 would have struggled against fixed-wing airliners, slower, thirstier, and vastly more expensive to maintain per seat. In the West, intelligence services would have taken notice immediately. A Soviet heavy-lift fleet this size would have reshaped NATO's threat assessments. The United States had no direct equivalent. It might have accelerated American heavy-lift helicopter research, pushing programs like the Typhoon family further, faster. But even in this alternate timeline, the V-12's greatest enemy would remain the same, its own complexity. Twin rotors, 4 engines, one long interconnect shaft. Every additional aircraft in the fleet would have meant more specialized parts, more trained crews, and more points where the entire system could fail. Realistically, a production VEL fleet would likely have numbered only in the dozens, never in the hundreds. The cost curve simply wouldn't allow it. And by the early 1980s, even this hypothetical fleet would have faced the same fate as the real V-12, replaced by leaner, single-rotor giants. More than 50 years later, no helicopter has ever matched the V-12's raw lifting records, not even today's most advanced heavy-lift aircraft. The closest modern equivalent, Russia's Mi-26, still uses a single rotor. Nobody has seriously attempted the V-12's twin-rotor approach again. Modern composite materials could, in theory, make a V-12-sized aircraft lighter and safer than its 1960s counterpart ever was. But the mission it was built for, flying nuclear missiles to hidden sites, has been solved permanently by cheap, mobile ground launchers. That's why the V-12's true legacy isn't military. It's the blueprint it left behind for lifting impossibly heavy cargo by rotor alone. The MiL V-12 was never really a failure. It was a success that arrived for a war that never came. Even in a world where it had entered mass production, the outcome would likely have been the same: cancellation, just delayed by a decade. What makes it unforgettable isn't what it accomplished operationally. It's proof of what Soviet engineers could build when given no limits at all. Today, it sits in silence. Its rotors still, its story mostly forgotten outside aviation circles. But its records remain unbroken. The world's largest helicopter never went to war. It never carried a missile in anger. It simply proved that it could, and that was enough. Some machines are remembered for what they did. The V-12 is remembered for what it made possible, and for the question it still leaves.